dig into the funding approach because that's the core of the funding strategy, and it tends to be the stuff that's not well known in the startup community. The funding strategy, as we mentioned, we have the progression from approach, sources, vehicles, and targets. Okay, and we're going to look at when to raise funds. We have here a graph that shows the typical growth of a company's value over time. Notice it is a stair step. Very rarely do you have some type of smooth growth curve. Okay, so with this stair step, it's important to raise funds after you've reached an inflection point, which is a measurable milestone that dramatically increases your company's value. The inflection points in this graph are the red diamonds. If you want to raise money right after the inflection point, the green boxes would be the correct time to be able to time your fundraise. Okay. So why is it important to raise funds after reaching an inflection point? Well, because raising funds at that point means you're raising at the peak of the company's value. It increases your leverage so that you can seek better valuation and better terms. Okay. So if you want to raise funds at the green boxes on that growth line, that also means, if that's the best time, that also means there's a worst time. The worst time is right before you reach an inflection point. And if you don't know what your inflection points are, where what they specifically are for your specific startup, how do you know whether you're raising funds at the green box or the red box? Okay, chances are probably don't. When you raise funds at the wrong time, as already mentioned, you could potentially get very bad terms. There's plenty of people who do focus on the highest valuation, but the reality is sometimes getting better terms at a lower valuation is a better deal for the founder. And we'll give you an example right here of a company called FanDuel. Okay, FanDuel was acquired in 2018 for $465 million. Once you'd see that, and normally you would think that the founders are thinking about mansions and supercars and all the luxuries of life. Unfortunately, that's not how it turned out for the founders. The founders actually got nothing in this $500 million acquisition. How in the world does that happen? Okay. So it turns out that some of the terms in the deal were very investor friendly. And the specific term that triggered it was something called a drag along right. And the drag along right is where one party has the right to force another party to accept certain decisions. The drag along right combined with the liquidation preference, and liquidation preference meant who gets paid first. Okay. Investors normally negotiate for that, right? So if there is an exit, they get money out of the company first, and that's a fairly common term. But combining the liquidation preference with the drag along rights meant that certain investors could just basically force a deal. And that's exactly what happened. The liquidation preference terms on this particular deal meant that until FanDuel sold for more than $559 million, the founders would get nothing. This deal closed at 465. Okay, founders got nothing. They sued, they lost. Okay, that's painful. But Matt, do you have a specific example or anything you want to add to some of these terms and the stories here?
Just to add sort of to some of the, I don't want to say foolish, but things that entrepreneurs don't think about, is that they raise funds too early. If we go back and we looked at the slide on the various inflection points, one of the most common things you run into is that people are just too eager to raise funds. And I can really never understand why. It's not uncommon though to see, when you have a college student who maybe has to pay some bills or something where they're just in a rush to get maybe $10,000 even into their startup. You might have heard about the scenario, with Facebook where you had somebody with, the back of a napkin where they supposedly put some money down for an ownership percentage. That's usually not going to be a great idea. The other term that I see a lot of investors slip into documents for folks who did not hire an attorney or not working with Sam is a most favored nation clause. And what a most favored nation clause does, and by the way, this has nothing to do with the most favored nation clauses that you'll see in international deals, but what this clause does is make sure for an investor that no later investors will ever have better terms than them. Another buzzword you're going to see if you go Google is like a high resolution financing. That's one of the beautiful things that we're allowed to do for clients now. This removes your ability really to do that. As a business owner and a founder, you want to be able to negotiate better terms as your business is performing better. And when you put this most favored nation clause in there, you're going to run into a lot of problems. Number one, you're probably never going to get a better deal than your first investment round. You're going to reduce the flexibility on your deals and sort of, how do you convince a new investor to put money in if your company's maybe not doing as well? Which ultimately means that you're going to have to pass up money. Fundraising is not easy. We might talk about it, today, like there's an infinite amount of money out there, which there is, but you also have to get these people to give you money, and we don't know necessarily that the terms are going to be great. I think there's a huge reliance now on folks on standard terms and things that they get for free online, and that is just not the way to do it, unfortunately. If you believe in your business, invest the time and money to do that and make sure that you're making the right decisions. You don't want to slow down your growth and really hamstring your business by putting some of these they're not necessarily predatory clauses. There are times where it's appropriate, by the way, but in some cases, this lead to really, really poor results for founders, like FanDuel.
Yeah. So one of the things that Matt kind of highlights here is the need for good quality advice and such. And obviously, Matt is an attorney, and there's no client-attorney relationship through this. But I will say this is that I've seen plenty of situations where founders who are strapped for cash. I get it. I've done 5 startups. I remember, borrowing against my home equity. Worrying that if things go sideways, I could lose my house. All right, I get the cash constraint, but there's a point in time where it's founders should not be penny wise and pound foolish. Okay, make sure that you're getting quality input from people who really know the complete story and not just one side of it, not just one perspective. We hope to be able to provide a lot of that. A lot of things that I do over at Fundable Startups, we do provide a lot of free content so that we can build a relationship. Feel free to use it, and hopefully, when you're at a point where you have a little bit more budget, you'll come and look to us for other help and other resources.